State Law Detective Scott Sayers.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth? Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Scott Sayers, S-A-Y-E-R-S. My badge is 7157. I'm a Dallas police officer.
Where are you currently assigned to DPD?
Homicide unit.
Detective Sayers, how long have you been with the homicide unit at DPD?
I've been in the homicide unit 12 years. It'll be 13 years in March of next year.
Your experience there at DPD at the homicide unit, how many cases do you think you've been involved in, either as the lead or helping out as a team with the other members of the unit?
Personally, I've been assigned 130 cases. I've been involved in probably over 1,000.
I want to direct your attention to one particular capital murder case, the murder of Kendrick. On October 2nd of 2015, did you become involved in that investigation by being asked to go to the Dallas Auto Pound?
I did.
Explain to the jury what the nature of that call was.
So we had a demonstration by Dan Cossey in Titan, which is a kind of a bomb sniffing dog, but it was explained to us that he specializes in smelling small amounts of gunpowder or anything that could ignite. He came to our headquarters, which is 1400 South Lamar, and he did a demonstration in which he put shell casings throughout like the front flower bed of headquarters, and then he let his dog out and we watched the dog work and we watched the dog find everything. It was pretty cool. And so afterwards, Detective Ibarra, who's in our Special Investigations Unit, told me that Detective Barnes had a vehicle that was at the pound that had a search warrant, and they were going to search it, and he said it might be an interesting thing to take the dog out there and see if the dog hit on anything inside the car, because at the point we were still looking for a weapon. So I talked with Dan Cossey. I said if he wouldn't mind coming out to the pound and running his dog through the car, and he agreed. And so he followed me out to the pound. I think I had Detective Truliano with me. We began to search the car and found a weapon.
Detective Truliano is another detective there at DPD Homicide Unit?
He's retired from DPD and now works for Frisco PD, but he was in the homicide unit the time we went out to the auto pound.
You are ready to approach the witness, please?
You may.
Detective, I'm going to show you 21 photographs here. We've kind of been through these before. These photographs that were taken out there the day you were out there of the vehicle that was searched when Titan was out there.
Yes, these are the same photographs. I've looked at them 3 times already, once at my office and twice here.
These fairly accurately depict what it looked like out there that day?
They are.
Your Honor, State's going to offer State's Exhibits 193 through 200 and 202 through 212.
No objection.
Admitted.
Detective, I'm going to start with State's Exhibit 192, which is already in evidence. The jury's already seen this. Is that the vehicle that was searched out there that day?
It is.
And, in the course of the investigation, you are provided with the information about the investigation. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You knew that the suspect in this case, Kristopher Love, had been arrested driving that vehicle.
Correct.
Okay, so let's go to State's Exhibit 193. We can look at the exterior of the vehicle, 194. Now we'll go to State's Exhibit 195. This is the front driver's side.
Yes, sir. I remember the car well.
Now, just, we can see in the pictures, but just kind of describe the condition of the vehicle, the interior, what you observed.
It's messy. It looks like my wife's car.
There's 198 backseat.
It's got a lot of stuff in it.
Now, 199, we're looking now at the front passenger side. Now, I want to kind of slow down here a little bit and ask you, at this point, what was Titan doing?
So when we got there, we had had a demonstration, and I talked to Dan a little bit before we ran Titan through the car, and he kind of explained some things to me about inside locations versus outside locations. He explained to me that when it comes to cars, the dog's sense is so hypersensitive that sometimes if there's anything of a gun nature or weapon or shell casings inside the car, if the doors are all closed, that can be confined. When he let the dog in the car, he did his thing. The dog ran through the car. I noticed from the demonstration, Titan will signal by sitting. Okay? He doesn't bark or anything like that. So if he finds something, he'll sit. And that's his signal to Dan that he's found something. So Titan ran all through the car. He kept sniffing at the ashtray, and he would sniff from the ashtray up to the liner where the convertible kind of catches. And he would go back and forth from the ashtray up to the liner. And I asked Dan, I said, what is that? And he said, well, if there's anything that's gunshot residue or anything like that, it's going to be airborne, and the scent, you can't see, it's going to be moving. And if there's a slight breach where it connects and air can escape, it can realistically come up from where the item is and then kind of escape. So Dan and myself thought he was maybe seeing where the scent was traveling. Because if it's outside, you can see Titan following the scent depending on the wind.
Detective, you described the area where you saw Titan, seemingly interested. Let me show you State Exhibit 200. If you could turn to your left there and kind of draw on the screen, what area are you talking about that you saw him?
Okay, so this is the area.
Oops.
What'd I do? This is the area that Titan was hitting on. So when I say before he signaled, he would sniff here and then he would go up towards the roof line where everything attached and then back down, and then Titan would just sit in the driver's seat. And that was his signal to Dan that, hey, I found something, or something is suspicious right here. Dan then removed him from the car and made him do the whole car again. And on the second time, the dog did the same thing, and Dan said, look, sniffed in the ashtray. We looked in the ashtray, see if there's a shell casing in there. And then I noticed that the plastic right here was kind of loose.
Now let me go to State Exhibit 201. Just if you could reference the area you're talking about. And now I'll show State Exhibit 202. A little bit closer for the jury what it is you saw.
So you can see this plastic right here is a little loose. Notice right here, it's kind of coming away. My 23 years of experience in the department, I've dealt with vehicle searches before where individuals can hide things behind the stereo, inside the dash, behind the glove box, underneath consoles. You can tell that this console right here has got a big area where things can be hidden. So what I did was I pulled that plastic back and revealed everything underneath, and we found a gun.
Let me go to State Exhibit 203 and describe here for the jury what we're seeing.
So what we're doing is I'm pulling the plastic back, and you can see underneath where the ashtray is, there's a butt end of a gun.
Circle where you see that, please.
Yeah, this is the butt end of the gun. That's the magazine that goes up into the gun of an automatic.
What did you do when you saw that gun hidden up and under that console?
Celebrated. I mean, high fives, and we were ecstatic. I told the crime scene guy, we're taking pictures. I called Eric and told him that we found a gun. We then had the crime scene guy take the gun, take pictures of the gun. It was something that I did not expect to find for sure.
Did you actually collect that gun?
I collected the gun. We knew that we had evidence at the scene of the crime that could be compared, so I took the gun directly to our property unit, to Susan Kerr, who does NIBIN and gun comparisons, and had her analyze it.
NIBIN's a database for ballistics and firearms, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, let me show you State Exhibit 204. You yourself actually pulled the gun out of that console, is that right?
I did.
Go to 204. Is this the gun?
It is.
A little bit closer up in 205.
Smith & Wesson 40, and we knew that the shell casings at the scene were 40. We knew the gun involved was a 40 cal.
206, we're just looking at the other side of the gun. Now, was this gun loaded?
Yes.
Show you State Exhibit 207. Well, that's upside down. What do we see in that picture?
So we make a gun safe. We try to make a gun safe. So what the crime scene guy does is he takes the bullets out, unloads the bullets, and he unloads the gun itself, or takes the shell out of the weapon. This gun, we had problems unloading it, getting the shell casing out of the chamber. So I ended up transporting it with the shell in the chamber and let the gun evidence people deal with disarming it.
Go ahead and show you State's Exhibit 208, and then with the court's permission, may I approach the witness? The first thing I want to show you is what's marked here, State's Exhibit 213. Now, this item has been checked by the bailiffs. It is secure. What is State's Exhibit 213?
That's the gun we found in the car that's in the picture.
State's Exhibit 208 is on the screen. The gun in that picture is what you're holding in your hand.
It is.
Let me show you State's Exhibit 214. What is this?
It's a magazine that came from inside the gun.
Is that what's shown
It
up
is.
on the screen in State's Exhibit 208?
It is.
And let me get you to take a look at the contents of State's Exhibit 215.
It's the live rounds that you see in the picture.
State offer State Exhibits 213, 214, and 215.
Your Honor, no objections other than those previously stated.
Yes, sir. Admitted.
Detective, let me start with 213 so we can show this to the jury. This is the gun that was found in that Sebring out there on October 2nd, 2015.
It is.
And then 214 is the magazine that's seen in the picture there.
That's correct.
And 215 are they call them live rounds, cartridges.
Yes, sir.
Detective, would you, in your experience, say that that gun was pretty well hidden up under that console?
It was.
Let me move on to the photographs that have been entered. I want to go back outside the vehicle to State's Exhibit 209. Is that the trunk we see there?
It is.
Quite a few items in there. And let me go to 210. And I want to reference, before we go to 210 there, 209, the driver's door being open. And is there like a little area in the driver's door, kind of the lower part of the door where you could, storage area or whatever?
Yes, sir.
So I'll go to 210. In that area, what's that item in black in there?
It's a cell phone.
Is this the cell phone that was in the vehicle there?
Yes, sir.
Marked item number 2 in State's Exhibit 211, that was a cell phone that was recovered from that vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Front and back sides.
That's correct.
Detective, on this vehicle, do you recall that there were license plates from the state of Tennessee?
Yes, sir.
Detective, I believe that's all the questions I have. Thank you for coming down. Your Honor, I pass the witness.
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you, sir. You may stay down here free from the courthouse.
Thank you.
State calls April Kendrick.
Good morning. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, excuse me. Good morning, ma'am. Please tell the jury your name.
My name is April Kendrick. Last name is spelled Kendrick.
Ms. Kendrick, are you currently employed?
I am the firearms supervisor at the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences, which is also known as SWIFT, or the Dallas County Crime Lab.
Well, let's start with this. What does a firearms examiner do at the crime lab?
A firearm examiner is within a discipline of forensic science that focuses on firearm and tool mark identification, as well as examination of items for gunshot residue for potential distance determination.
Tell the jury a little bit about your education and your experience and your qualifications to do what you do over there at the crime lab.
Okay. I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology as well as a Master of Science in Forensic Science. I have been employed at SWIFT's for about 13 and a half years, and as a part of my training to be a firearm and tool mark examiner, I went through a formal 3-year training program. As a part of that training program, I participated in numerous written, verbal, and hands-on exercises, as well as verbal, hands-on, and written tests. Annually, I perform 4 to 5 proficiency tests, and basically proficiency tests are tests that I take to show that I am successfully completing the analyses that I perform, and I have successfully completed all of those.
Now, Ms. Kendrick, I want to direct your attention to a specific lab number. It's IFS-15-14219. Are you familiar with that laboratory number?
I am.
How do you know that lab number?
I examined evidence in that case.
Now, let's kind of first explain this. How does the Dallas County Crime Lab, SWIFT, how do you guys keep up with your cases? How do you identify one case from the other?
Each complainant or victim typically gets a unique lab number, and the lab numbers are IFS, which stands for Institute of Forensic Sciences. There's a dash and then a 2-digit number, which is the last 2 digits of the year, and then another dash and 5 additional digits, which are unique to that particular case. So each case is assigned a unique case number. Within that case, every item of evidence is assigned a unique item number, and that's how we track our evidence.
So that case number will remain unique whether it's with your department or other departments, say, the medical examiner. The case identifier is the same throughout the office. Is that fair to say?
Yes, we use the same case number that the medical examiner's office uses.
Now, the lab number that I just gave you, that is associated with a victim of a capital murder by the name of Kendrick K. Hatcher. Is that correct?
Excuse me. Yes, it is.
Ms. Kendrick, what, if any, tests were you asked to perform in this particular case?
I was asked to examine hair that had been removed from around the head wound.
What's the source of you receiving this hair?
The medical examiner collects that during the autopsy, and from there they submit it to our evidence registrars, and that's where I would receive the evidence from, is our evidence registrars.
Now, are you made aware that Kendra Hatcher suffered a gunshot wound to the head? Were you made aware of that?
Yes, I did have that information.
Why is that information provided to you?
Well, when hair is collected and submitted to my lab for examination, it typically does come from a head wound, but I can get that information through our laboratory information management system.
So let's talk a little bit about the testing that you did on the hair that was submitted. Explain to the jury what you're doing when you get this hair for analysis.
Okay. When I receive the hair for analysis, I basically take it and kind of separate it out because it tends to kind of be stuck together. And then I examine it microscopically. What I'm looking for in my microscopic examination in particular is gunpowder or potentially bullet fragments or something like that would be indicative of a gunshot wound.
Now explain to the jury just sort of in general how it is that gunpowder can end up on someone's hair and how it works getting out of the gun.
Okay. When a firearm is fired, a bullet will leave the muzzle or the end of the gun, but in addition to the bullet leaving, there are other types of gunshot residue that leave as well. And in particular, sometimes gunpowder is leaving the muzzle or the end of the gun, and that's gunpowder that didn't burn fully during the firing process, and so the place that it leaves the gun is through the muzzle along with the bullet.
And so what is it that you're looking for when you're conducting your examination?
I'm looking for gunpowder or potentially bullet fragments.
Now, in this particular case, what were you asked to do specifically?
To examine the hair for gunpowder.
Ms. Kendrick, explain to the jury what you found in your examination.
I actually did not observe any gunpowder in the examination of the hair.
Now, I want to ask you about that. Were you made aware of the circumstances in which Kendra Hatcher was found after having been killed?
I may have read that in the medical examiner's investigation narrative. I don't recall particulars, and that typically doesn't play into my examination process.
So I want to discuss factors that can affect whether you recover or find GSR on human hair. What types of things can affect that?
Well, of course, distance is going to be the most critical part of that. If the muzzle or the end of the gun is close enough to an object, then the gunpowder may be deposited on that object. If there is a large distance between the muzzle of the gun and the object that I'm examining, then the gunpowder may have fallen to the ground, lost its energy, fallen to the ground or to some other surface before it reached that item in particular. When I'm examining hair, particularly of a head wound, head wounds tend to bleed a lot. So another possibility that could affect whether gunpowder is present around a wound is if the blood has potentially washed away any gunpowder that may have been there. It could be that the ammunition that was fired is particularly good at burning all of the gunpowder, so not a lot of gunpowder leaves the gun, so there may not be gunpowder to be deposited on that object. So those are some of the factors that could play into that.
I want to focus specifically on one factor. The jury is aware, based on having seen pictures of the crime scene, that Kendra Hatcher was found face up with blood pooling from her head and sort of flowing downhill in a ramp in a parking garage. How would that affect whether we might find gunshot residue on her hair?
Really the only thing that, as part of my testing, that could affect that would potentially be the blood. If there was gunpowder there, it could potentially have washed some of it away.
Ms. Kendrick, I also want to talk about some other factors that you and I had previously discussed, and that is that you mentioned that depending on where the medical examiner gets the hair, you would ask me, did Kendra Hatcher have long hair? And she did. Explain to the jury how, the fact that Kendra had long hair could affect your findings.
When the hair is collected from around a wound, the hair is collected from directly around the wound. So if the wound is, say, on the back or the side of the head, and it's not at the very top, there's potentially other hair that was above that would have been covering that wound. So if the hair is collected from directly around the wound, there may be other hair laying over the top of it, which could have potentially had gunpowder on it, because that was over the top or covering the hair that was covered.
So in this particular case that you conducted an examination, I guess, is it fair to say that there are two factors that could have affected your results? Number one, the fact that there was blood flowing away from Kendra's head, and the second being that the medical examiner, we don't know if that hair was underneath the exterior hair. Is that fair to say?
Those are two, but distance also plays a factor in that. So it would depend on how far away the gun was. It would also depend on whether or not there was a large amount of gunpowder that was propelled from the muzzle of the gun when the shot was fired.
Now, Ms. Kendrick, in connection with your examination, did you prepare a report that documents the findings that you just explained to the jury?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Ms. Kendrick, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 225. Is this a copy of your report documenting your findings?
Yes, State's Exhibit 225 is a copy of my report that was issued on January 4th, 2018.
Offer State's Exhibit 225.
Objection.
Admitted.
And everything you just told the jury regarding your findings is contained in that document.
Yes.
Ms. Kendrick, I appreciate you coming down today. I don't have any more questions. I pass the witness.
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You may stay down. You're free to leave the courthouse.
Thank you.
State calls David Spence.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have just one moment?
Good morning, sir. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Yes, sir. I'm David Spence. I'm the supervisor at the Trace Evidence Section at the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences here in Dallas.
Now, Mr. Spence, the jury just heard from April Kendrick. She is in the firearms unit. You are in a different section there at SWIFT's, at the crime lab.
That is correct. I'm in the Trace Evidence Section.
Well, tell the jury what someone in the trace evidence section does.
Well, in the Trace Evidence Section, we analyze a variety of different types of physical evidence. We examine gunshot residues to determine whether or not somebody's fired a gun or handled a gun or been in proximity to a gun. We examine hairs, we examine bloodstain patterns, we examine fire debris and other types of trace evidence.
Mr. Spence, what sort of education, training, and experience do you have to hold the job of supervisor of the trace evidence section?
Well, the basic requirements, you have to have at least a Bachelor of Science degree in a physical science. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry. I first started working in the forensic science field back in 1986. I started as a breath test technical supervisor working for the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab. I was stationed in Wichita Falls for about a year and a half. I then transferred to the Texas Department of Public Safety Headquarters Crime Lab in Austin, where I was in the trace evidence unit for approximately 9.5 years. And during those years, I was trained in pretty much all different aspects of trace evidence examinations. I then transferred to the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab in Houston, where I was a trace evidence examiner as well as a drug chemist. I spent, I believe, 2.5 years in that capacity prior to coming here to Dallas as supervisor of the trace evidence section. And I've been in this position for approximately 19.5 years at this point.
Mr. Spence, I want to direct your attention to a specific case number there at SWIFT's. It's case number IFS-15-142219. Are you familiar with that case number?
Yes, I am.
What examination, if any, did you perform in connection with that case number?
In this case number, I examined a gunshot residue kit collected from Kendra Hatcher, as well as other hair items.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Mr. Spence, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 226. Do you recognize this envelope?
Yes, State Exhibit 226 has our laboratory number IFS-15-14219, has my initials DWS, the date 12/15/17, and items, well, it's item 59, but it has items 591 and 592 contained within the envelope.
Are these the items that you actually tested, the hair from Kendra Hatcher that was submitted to you? I'm sorry, the test kits from...
This is the gunshot residue evidence collection test kits. Correct.
Officer State's Exhibit 226.
No objection.
Admitted.
Mr. Spence, let me get you to explain to the jury what is a test kit for GSR?
Okay, a GSR test kit consists of an envelope containing 2 sample stubs. The sample stubs are basically, they're aluminum discs with a pin. They're 1/2 inch diameter, and they have on the flat surface, they have a carbon double-sided adhesive. The device is shaped basically like a thumbtack, and they're used to basically tape lift particles from the hands of an individual. So there's one sample stub that's used to collect from the back of the right hand, and another sample stub used to collect particles from the back of the left hand. And these are specifically designed to be analyzed using a scanning electron microscope with an energy dispersive X-ray spectrometer as a detector.
And where did you get State's Exhibit 226?
State Exhibit 226 is a gunshot residue kit. It was, I believe, it was collected, actually let me see. Anyway, it was submitted by the Dallas Police Department.
And was that kit collected by the Dallas County Medical Examiner?
I believe it was, yes.
Mr. Spence, I want you to just get right to it. Tell the jury what you found when you examined the gunshot residue kits that you had from Kendrick Hatcher.
Okay, so as I stated, the gunshot residue kit was analyzed using a scanning electron microscope with an energy dispersive X-ray spectrometer. I identified 5 particles characteristic of primary gunshot residue on item 591, which is sample stuff from the back of the left hand, and another 1 particle, characteristic particle, on the sample stuff item 592, which was collected from the back of the right hand of Kendrick Hatcher.
What did you find when you examined those kits?
So that those 6 particles, which are characteristic of primary gunshot residue, were detected, and what that would indicate is that the individual either fired a gun or handled a gun or a firearm component or object that had primary gunshot residue on it, or that the individual was in the proximity of a firearm at the time the firearm was discharged.
And your findings are that gunshot residue was on the back of both of Kendrick Hatcher's hands.
That is correct, yes.
And you explained to the jury what the possible scenarios are. Handling a firearm could be one.
Correct.
Being in the proximity of a firearm that was fired, is that also correct?
That is correct, yes.
Now, I want to give you a hypothetical situation. Your Honor, may I step forward?
You may.
Would your findings be consistent with the following hypothetical? Kendra Hatcher was shot in the back of the head and at that time had both of her hands up. If the gunshot came from behind her, could that be consistent with your findings?
Yes, given the hypothetical position that you described, it would be consistent with one of the ways that you could get gunshot residue on the hands of the individual, and especially if the gun is in fairly close proximity to the individual at the time of the shooting.
Now, Mr. Spence, in connection with your examination and your findings, did you prepare a report?
Yes, I did.
May I approach with you, I'm going to show you State Exhibit 227. Is this a copy of the report that you prepared in connection with this case?
Yes, State Exhibit 227 is a copy of the gunshot residue test report on case number IFS-15-14219, and it describes the analysis of a primary gunshot residue kit, item 5-9, and it has my signature on the second page.
And this documents exactly what you just told this jury about your examination of the gunshot residue kits.
That is correct, yes.
State Officer State Exhibit 227.
No objection.
Admitted.
Mr. Spence, I don't have any more questions. I appreciate you coming down. Your Honor, I pass the witness.
Thank you.
Spence, I just have a couple of questions for you. Number one, when you described the presence of gunshot residue on the 2 hands, you described that there were 5 particles found on one particle found on the other hand. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And is it not true that the presence of 1 particle of gunshot residue would not even be consistent with a finding of the presence of a gunshot residue pursuant to the FBI standards?
Well, I can't speak to the FBI standards. By our lab procedure, a single particle is consistent with primary gunshot residue.
Well, it's just the presence of a particle, correct?
Correct, yes.
I mean, in this particular case, what was it? Was it antimony, barium, or lead?
This particle is what we describe as a characteristic particle. It contained all three elements, antimony, barium, and lead.
Okay. And you said that the presence on one hand was one particle, 5 particles. When we're talking particles, we're talking about microscopic particles, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And you said that this could give you some kind of a guidance in the possibility as to the range of fire?
It's not used for range of fire determination. It's just whether or not it's present or absent.
Talk to me about the range of fire. Why would you not be able to make it or draw any type of conclusions based on range of fire from the presence of gunshot residue?
Well, there are different tests. There are different types of gunshot residue tests.
Mm-hmm.
There's this test where we test for the presence of primary gunshot residue. And these are particles that originate from within the primer of a cartridge case. There are other tests we call range of fire testing, where generally you would take the clothing of a shooting victim, clothing item that has a bullet defect in it. We can do several different chemical tests to develop patterns of gunshot residue from the clothing, and then we can take the actual weapon used in the incident along with the same type of ammunition. We fire test shots at known distances, and then we compare the known distance patterns to what we find on the clothing from the decedent. And from that testing, we can estimate range of fire. We can bracket a lower to an upper range.
And you could also do that based upon the amount of gunpowder residue that would come from the end of the projectile. Is that correct? Or the firearm?
Well, from the firearm, yes.
Yes, sir.
So that is the test where you determine the range of fire. It's a different test than what I performed.
Do you know if any testing of the handgun in this particular situation was tested to do any range of fire determinations or
I'm unaware. I personally did not perform any of that testing. I'm not sure that there was any clothing involved that would be relevant for that testing, but I'm unaware. I did not perform that test.
That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Anything further?
Mr. Spence, I just want to make sure that something's clear here. That Ms. Kendrick already testified to this jury about environmental factors specific to this case, which could affect whether gunshot residue is found. Would that also apply to your testing? I mean, if a body was potentially touched or moved around for, say, medical treatment, could that affect, your findings?
Yes. The primary gunshot residue particles are microscopic metallic particles. They're very, very tiny particles. And any interruption of those particles, let's say somebody touches the body or the area of the body that has particles on it, any contact with those areas would potentially remove particles. On a living individual, if you get primary residue particles on your hands, just normal activities of touching objects, washing your hands, wiping your hands on your pants or whatever, would remove or reduce the number of particles from your hands. On a deceased individual, people that are handling the body, that may be trying to perform medical assistance or what have you, there's possibility of removing particles from the hands just based on those activities.
That's all I have. Thank you. Pass it.
No further.
Thank you, sir. You may stand down. You're free to leave.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State called Warren Jenkins.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Investigator Roy Jenkins with the Dallas County DA's office.
And Mr. Jenkins, how long have you been with the Dallas County District Attorney's Office?
8 years.
And prior to coming on board with the District Attorney's Office, how were you employed?
With the Dallas County Sheriff's Department for 21 years.
And can you tell the jury, just in general, what your duties are as an investigator with the Dallas County District Attorney's Office?
Currently, right now. Currently, I'm assigned to the Homeland Security Investigations Division on a full-time basis. I still am a full-time DA investigator, but I'm assigned to Homeland Security full-time.
What other responsibilities have you had during your time here at the District Attorney's Office?
I've been assigned to the Child Abuse Division, been assigned to Sexual Assault Division, Community Response Division, and that's pretty much it. I've been 2 years on this task force.
And as part of your duties with the various divisions that you've had within the District Attorney's Office, are there times that you are asked to download what we call jail calls?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury the process involved in downloading jail calls?
The jail call system is an internet-based system which allows officers to monitor and record any and all calls from people incarcerated within the Dallas County jail system. So then you can either record those or just monitor them.
And with respect to the jail calls with the Dallas County system, are there admonitions and warnings given to those individuals prior to them actually making the call?
Yes, sir.
And is that a recording that goes on every single call that individual makes? He's given those same admonitions and warnings.
Yes, sir.
And part of the admonitions and warnings is the individual was told prior to making the call that this call is being recorded.
Yes, sir.
And nonetheless, people still get on those phones and they make the calls and they make statements and they make admissions that sometimes come back and hurt them.
Yes, sir.
I want to turn your attention back to October the 2nd of 2015. Individual who was in custody at the Dallas County Jail by the name of Kristopher Love. Were you asked to download any jail calls he made that day?
Yes, sir, I was.
And was that on October the 2nd of 2015?
Yes, sir.
Or approach the witness room?
You may.
Investigator Jenkins, I want to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 228 and labeled 10-2-15 jail call Kristopher Love. Did you download this jail call?
Yes, sir.
Did you have a chance prior to testifying today to actually listen to this to verify that it's the call that you downloaded?
Yes, sir, I did.
And has it been altered, deleted, any kind of way?
No, sir.
All right, we would offer State's Exhibit 228.
Good. We have no objection.
Admitted.
Pass the witness.
No question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Call Detective Eric Barnes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me okay, Detective?
Yes, sir.
Would you take a minute and introduce yourself to this jury?
Yes, sir. My name is Eric Barnes. I work for the Dallas Police Department. I've been employed with the Dallas Police Department for approximately 12 years. During that time, I've been assigned to the homicide unit for the last 6 years, and I am a full-time task force officer with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Detective Barnes, I want to take you back to September of 2015. Were you assigned to the homicide unit at that time?
Yes, sir.
Earlier in the trial, the jury saw a video, a body cam actually, of an officer arriving at the scene of this offense, and in the background you can hear reference to only one homicide detective being on duty that day. Do you recall that being the case with you?
No, sir. I was actually on call. My day shift starts at 8, ends at 4. And so I just made it home. And when you're on call, you have they call your cell phone number. It's on a callback roster. So I just made it home, sat on my couch, and I got a phone call that there was a murder at 1700 Cedar Springs.
In a city the size of Dallas, how are homicide cases assigned to detectives in your section?
We basically have a batting roster that contains everyone's name, and we go name by name basis. Some variants that may change that is someone may be on vacation, or they may be in some training that they can't attend, and they'll just get skipped over.
And when this offense happened, your name, you were the next man up. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
Initially, on the day that this happened, tell us what your initial steps are to start your investigation.
The first thing that you do, you receive the call that a homicide is taking place. I arrived at the crime scene. There was already officers there working the crime scene prior to getting there. They'll give you a brief on the things that they've done, their observations, things they've seen, and people that they've talked to prior to arriving there.
And after arriving there, are you looking to see if there's security cameras, anything of that nature at the scene?
That's correct. Normally, the patrol officers that respond to the initial 911 call will help canvass for witnesses, as well as cameras that may be present that captured the incident. And also the first arriving detectives will do that also.
So day one of this investigation, you come to find that you do have some footage of a particular vehicle of interest.
That's correct.
And did you ask that that footage be downloaded?
Yes, I did.
And would that footage be what the jury has seen previously as far as the testimony so far?
That's correct.
In that footage, what drew your attention to what we see?
There were witnesses that spoke about a black Jeep Cherokee that potentially was involved in this offense. And that was all we had to go on. That's what we focused on and what we looked for in the video.
Would that be based on the individual by the name of Syed, who made the 911 call?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And he gave a description of the black Jeep Cherokee?
Yes, sir.
After he gives you a description of the black Jeep Cherokee, do you then see that Cherokee on the security cam?
Yes.
The following day of this offense, did an individual by the name of Jose Luis Ortiz contact the Dallas Police Department?
Yes, he did.
And did he provide information that the Jeep Cherokee in question was actually his?
Yes, he did.
With that information, what did you do?
We actually spoke with Mr. Ortiz and questioned him about, one, how he was sure that the vehicle was his. He talked about some of the paint that was faded on the hood of the vehicle and also the rims that were on the vehicle. They were pretty distinct. The next question was, who had your vehicle during this time?
And he gave you a name?
Yes, Brendan Delgado.
Additionally to giving you a name, did you also basically canvass his residential area to see if there's any security or video around that area?
Yes, I did.
And did you find something?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find?
The neighbors that live directly across the street from Mr. Ortiz had security cameras on their front porch that were facing the street view of the house.
Your approach, Ron?
You may.
And did you ask them for permission to download that security?
Yes, I did.
I'll show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 90. You have seen this before, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
And it's not altered, deleted. It accurately represents what was on that security camera.
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time, we would offer State's Exhibit 90 for record purposes.
No objection.
Admitted.
Now, after talking to Mr. Ortiz, you have some sort of a lead as to which direction you would take your investigation.
That's correct.
How long did it take you, after speaking with him, to make contact with Brenda Delgado?
It was immediate.
And did you go to her or did she come to you?
No, we sent some detectives to go out and pick her up. She was studying at a friend's house in Irving during the time.
Talk to us about your interview with Brenda Delgado. What stood out?
Brenda seemed very prepared for the interview. Her story never shifted. She even presented me with the receipt when I questioned her about her whereabouts during the time of the offense. She presented me with the receipt from Chili's in pristine condition, no wrinkles, no flaws, and just almost prepared for me to ask for that.
Let me stop you there. Did that seem to you a little bit rehearsed?
It did. Most people, I didn't know that I was going to speak to her that day, but she was prepared to talk to me.
And after, well, how long was that interview?
It lasted for several hours.
And did you ask her about her involvement in driving that Jeep?
Yes.
What was her response, or what did she have to say to you about the Jeep?
She adamantly denied driving the Jeep, and she told me that the Jeep was driven by a friend of hers named Crystal.
Did she give you the full name?
Yes,
And after getting that name of Crystal, that would be Crystal Cortez?
that's correct.
What did you do with that information?
We got a phone number for Crystal that Brenda had in her phone. One of the homicide detectives that was assisting me with the investigation reached out to Crystal by cell phone and made arrangements to pick Crystal up and bring her to the office so she could be interviewed.
And in her interview, and I'm talking about the interview with Crystal Cortez, when you first start talking to her, does she seem overly eager to talk to you?
Yes, she seemed pretty amped up and excited, and it just gave me the belief that she had already had a story prepared.
And how long into her prepared story did it start to fall apart?
Very quickly.
And her response to it falling apart was to open up and say, okay, you got me, I'm gonna tell the truth?
Yes.
Even though she's saying she's telling the truth, did you find that she wasn't telling the truth?
Yes, there was a lot of chunks of her story were very unbelievable, and there were certain details in her stories that I knew from watching the video and also just knowing how crimes like this generally occur.
When you say watching the video, are you referring to the video from the parking garage that shows that Jeep coming into the garage, parking, then backing up, exiting the wrong way, and coming back out the way it came?
That's correct.
And the chunks of her story that were falling apart, were those chunks not matching up with what we see on that video?
Yes, sir.
Now, each time she changed her story, would she add something to it?
Yes, she did.
Each time she added something to it, did it really, pretty much for the most part, help corroborate her involvement in the offense?
Yes.
At some point, does she ultimately own up to at least being part of this offense?
Yes, she did.
Does she ever fully give you the entire story?
No, she doesn't.
Does she give you enough to warrant her being arrested for capital murder?
Yes.
Now, once she's under arrest for capital murder, y'all continue to talk to her. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
Over the next several days.
Yes, sir.
Did she provide you with a description of the person that was with her in that Jeep?
Yes, she did.
Now, when we talk about the person that's in that Jeep, she initially gives you a name of Lamar.
That's correct.
And how long does it take for her to actually give you the real name of the person in the Jeep with her?
It was a couple of interviews.
Does she give you a description?
Yes, she does.
Do you recall the description she gave you?
Yes, black male, 5'10", very thin, muscular build, dreadlocks. And she gave enough of a description that we decided to get a composite sketch done.
Mayor Pro Tem Witness Room?
You may.
Detective, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 221 and 222. Do you recognize what's photographed here?
Yes, sir.
And do these photographs accurately represent the pictures you had taken of the defendant, of his hair and his hand.
That's correct.
Your Honor, read off for states 221 and 222.
No objection.
Commissioner Polish?
You may.
Now, when we start talking about the description, did she describe, you said dreadlocks?
Yes, sir.
Did she describe them as being a significant style?
She said they were skinny.
And in this photograph, you are having the defendant pull down one of his twists,
Yes,
and it was purpose of that to show how long they are?
yes.
Did she also give you a description of a particular scar?
Yes, she did.
Describe that.
She described a scar on the right hand of the suspect. At the time she gave that description, I didn't know how significant it would be, but I thought it'd be best to document it in the event that we came across a suspect, we had something to compare it to.
Looking at the screen next to you, can you circle for the jury where that scar is?
Yes.
Now, when he's brought in for questioning, and you see that, it's fairly consistent with what she had described to you.
Yes, it was it looked a little different than what I pictured, but it was in the same area that she described.
So, given the information that you got from Crystal, you have a physical description.
Yes,
She also give you a description of the vehicle that the shooter drove.
yes.
What did she describe as his vehicle?
Blue Chrysler Sebring that had a black top with an out-of-state plate, and she believed it was a Tennessee license plate.
Did she also tell you the part of town that he was known to hang around in?
Yes, she did.
And do you recall where that is?
Yes, she described the Chaucer area, at Chaucer, Chesterfield area, right in the southwest area of Oak Cliff.
Yesterday, we heard testimony from Detective Lee Thompson about having the vehicle pinged, having the telephone pinged. Were you present while that was taking place?
I was at the office while they were out in the field doing that.
Were you still doing interviews when that was happening?
Yes, sir.
And at some point during your interviews, do you recall getting a call that they had found a gun?
I believe it was early morning, the 2nd, when I got the phone call that they found a gun inside the vehicle.
Let's talk about how Mr. Love is initially brought in for questioning. What is your process when you want to sit down and interrogate/interview a potential suspect?
Normally when I'm preparing for an interrogation, you try to do homework on your subject. In this case, I didn't know very many personal details about Mr. Love. His identity just became known to me maybe a few minutes before I sat down and actually started talking with him. So that was, the only thing I knew was what I believed to happen on the day of the incident. I sat down with Mr. Love in the very beginning. One of the first things I try to do is build a rapport with the person that I'm interviewing. That gives me a chance to get to know them, get to know personal details about them, find out what's important to them, and actually establish a baseline when I ask them certain questions and see what their physical movements are when they're telling the truth or when they get in a stressful situation.
And I want to back up a little bit, Detective. Mr. Love was brought in initially for questioning, not based on a gun being found, but the vehicle matching the description and the pinging of the phone.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And was that interview with him recorded?
Yes, it was.
Are all of those interviews recorded?
Yes, they are.
Now, your interview with Mr. Love is pretty extensive,
Yes.
approximately around 20 hours.
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury how, what treatment he received from you and the Dallas Police Department over those 20 hours?
During the course of that 20-hour period, Mr. Love was granted opportunity to use the restroom. We checked on him regularly to see if he was hungry. We allowed him to make phone calls to check on his kids. We gave him a blanket. We also provided him with water, with coffee, and allowed him to smoke cigarettes.
You fed him?
Yes, I did, and I actually bought a decent barbecue meal from a restaurant that's located right behind our headquarters.
I think, in fact, you asked him to compare if that barbecue from Baby Back Shack matches up with the barbecue from Memphis.
Yes, I did.
And I think the Baby Back Shack is modeled on Memphis barbecue.
It is Memphis-style barbecue.
That's what you asked him that.
Yes, sir.
Can I approach the witness, Your Honor? States Exhibit 229A, 229B, 229C, and 229D encompass the 20 hours that you spent with Mr. Love in terms of an interview. You've had a chance to look at the interview in its entirety.
Yes, sir.
Now, States Exhibit 230, labeled Kristopher Love Interview A through Y clips, are portions of that interview, relevant portions of that interview. If you had a chance to look at that.
Yes, sir.
And would you agree that what's contained in States Exhibit 230 contain relevant portions of that video?
Yes, sir.
Would you also agree that it would be fairly unreasonable to expect this jury to sit here and listen to a full 20 hours of recorded interrogation?
I agree.
Now, we would offer States 229A, 229D, 229C, 229D for record purposes, and States 230 for all purposes.
Okay.
A minute.
Approach, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. All right, members of the jury, let's go ahead and take our morning break. It's quarter after. You'll be back to the jury